Thunder was a beautiful chestnut-colored quarter horse with a white star on his forehead. At 12 years old, he had spent most of his life on the Miller family farm, where he had become much more than just an animal. He was part of the family. Ben Miller had bought Thunder as a young horse when his daughter Lily was only a toddler. From the beginning, there was something special about the bond between the little girl and the gentle horse. As Lily grew from a toddler to a child, Thunder was always there, patient and kind as she learned to brush him, feed him apple slices, and eventually ride him around the small paddock behind their farmhouse. "Look at me, Daddy," Lily would call out, her small hands gripping Thunder's mane as he carried her carefully around the ring. Ben would watch with a mixture of pride and protectiveness, though he knew Thunder would never let any harm come to his daughter. The farm was modest, just 20 acres outside of a small town in Kentucky. The Millers weren't wealthy, but they had enough land for a few animals, a vegetable garden, and enough pasture to keep Thunder happy. Ben's wife Annie worked as a nurse at the local clinic while Ben split his time between the farm and his carpentry business. "That horse is worth his weight in gold," Annie would often say as she watched Lily and Thunder through the kitchen window. "I've never seen an animal so gentle with a child." Thunder had earned his name as a foal. The story went that during his first thunderstorm, instead of being frightened like most young horses, he had raced around his field, seeming to challenge the storm itself. But with Lily, he moved with the deliberate gentleness of an animal who understood the precious cargo he carried. The problem started on an ordinary Tuesday in late spring. Ben noticed Thunder seemed reluctant to trot during Lily's riding lesson. The horse would start and then slow down, almost stumbling at times. "Whoa there, big guy," Ben said, approaching Thunder and running his hand down the horse's legs, checking for any obvious injuries. "What's going on with you today?" Thunder nuzzled Ben's shoulder, his dark eyes seeming troubled, but Ben could find nothing obviously wrong. No cuts, no swelling, nothing stuck in his hooves. "Maybe he's just having an off day," Ben told Lily, who had climbed down from the saddle with concern written all over her small face. "We all have those sometimes." But Thunder's off day stretched into an off week. Ben called their local veterinarian, Dr. Wilson, a woman who had been taking care of the farm's animals for years. "It could be a number of things," she said after examining Thunder. "Could be arthritis setting in, he's not young anymore. Could be a minor strain that needs rest. Let's give him a week off from riding and some anti-inflammatory medication, see if that helps." Lily was disappointed but understanding. Every day after school, she would still visit Thunder in his stall, bringing him carrots and reading him stories from her picture books. The horse would listen attentively, his ears flicking toward her voice, his large head lowered to her level as if making sure he didn't miss a word. "He'll get better soon," Lily told her parents confidently at dinner one night. "He told me so." Ben and Annie exchanged glances over their daughter's head but said nothing. 6-year-olds had their own way of seeing the world. But Thunder didn't get better. After a week of rest, he seemed even more unstable on his feet. Dr. Wilson came back, this time with more concern in her eyes as she watched Thunder move cautiously around his paddock. "I don't like how he's favoring both back legs now," she said quietly to Ben, making sure Lily was out of earshot. "This isn't presenting like a simple strain." More medications were tried. Special supplements were added to Thunder's feed. Ben even invested in a therapeutic blanket that was supposed to improve circulation and reduce inflammation. Nothing seemed to help. By the 3rd week, Thunder was struggling to stand up after lying down. Ben would find him in his stall in the morning, making desperate attempts to rise, his back legs seeming unable to support his weight. It would take both Ben and his neighbor pushing from behind to help the horse stand. "What's wrong with Thunder?" Lily would ask, her eyes growing wider and more worried each day. "Why can't he get up by himself?" "His legs are sick," Ben tried to explain, not knowing how else to put it. "Dr. Wilson is trying to figure out how to make them better." The truth was more complicated. Dr. Wilson had run several tests and had begun to suspect a neurological condition, something affecting Thunder's spine or nervous system that was causing progressive paralysis in his hind legs. "These conditions in horses are usually degenerative," she explained to Ben and Annie one evening on the porch, after Lily had gone to bed. "Meaning they get worse, not better, and treatment options are very limited." "But there must be something we can do," Annie insisted, thinking of how devastated Lily would be. "Surgeries or therapies or something." Dr. Wilson sighed, pushing her graying hair back from her face. There are some experimental treatments at the large equine hospitals, but they're extremely expensive. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars, and the success rates are very low for cases this advanced. Ben's shoulders slumped. They had some savings, but nothing close to what would be needed for such treatments, and even then the chances of success were slim. How long before he couldn't finish the sentence? Before he won't be able to stand at all? Dr. Wilson's voice was gentle. At the rate he's declining, maybe a couple of weeks, and at that point, we have to consider quality of life. He's already in pain, though he's hiding it well. That night after the vet left, Ben and Annie sat at their kitchen table long after midnight, talking in hushed voices about what to do. Thunder wasn't just a pet or livestock. He was Lily's best friend, the center of her young world. She's too young to understand, Annie whispered, wiping tears from her eyes. How do we explain this to her? The next morning brought the news they had been dreading. Ben went to the stable early and found Thunder down in his stall, making weak attempts to rise before falling back onto the straw bedding. Despite Ben's efforts and even with the neighbor's help, Thunder could not be gotten to his feet. Dr. Wilson came immediately when Ben called. She examined the horse carefully, noting how his back legs barely responded to stimulus now. I'm so sorry, Ben, she said finally, straightening up. He's essentially paralyzed in his hind end now. Even if we could get him up with a sling, he wouldn't be able to stay standing. Ben closed his eyes briefly, feeling like the air had been knocked from his lungs. So this is it? Dr. Wilson nodded sadly. I think it would be kindest to let him go before the suffering becomes too great. He's fighting now, but soon. How long can we wait? Ben asked, thinking of Lily, who was at school, who had no idea her beloved horse would never stand again. I can make him comfortable for a few days with pain medication, Dr. Wilson said. Give you time to say goodbye, but I wouldn't recommend waiting more than a week. Ben nodded, his throat too tight to speak. That afternoon, telling Lily was the hardest thing Ben and Annie had ever done. They sat her down in the living room, tried to explain in simple terms that Thunder was very sick, that his legs didn't work anymore, and that he was in pain. But you can fix him, Lily said, her small face confused. Like when I had an ear infection and had to take medicine. Honey, this isn't something that can be fixed, Annie tried to explain, her voice breaking. Sometimes bodies get too sick to get better. Lily's eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head stubbornly. No, Thunder can't die. He promised he'd teach me to jump the big fence when I'm older. He promised. Nothing they said could convince her. When they took her to see Thunder, still lying in his stall on fresh bedding, she simply sat down beside his head and stroked his face. It's okay, she whispered to him. You just need to rest. You'll feel better soon. Thunder nickered softly, nuzzling her hand as if trying to comfort her instead of seeking comfort for himself. For the next 3 days, Lily spent every moment she could with Thunder. She refused to believe what the adults were telling her. She brought him not just carrots and apples, but wildflowers she'd picked from the field, special rocks from her collection, and her favorite stuffed animal to keep him company. Ben and Annie watched helplessly, knowing they would have to schedule the euthanasia soon. Thunder was being kept comfortable with medication, but he couldn't remain lying down indefinitely. Already, despite their efforts to shift him slightly every few hours, he was developing sores where his weight pressed against the ground. We'll have to do it by the end of the week, Ben told Annie as they washed dishes that night, the sound of running water covering their conversation from Lily, who was drawing a picture for Thunder at the kitchen table. Annie nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. I keep thinking there must be something we missed, some treatment we don't know about. Ben put his arm around his wife's shoulders. Dr. Wilson says she's tried everything that could work for this kind of condition. It's just bad luck, a bad genetic hand that finally played out. What they didn't realize was that sometimes the most important discoveries come from the most unexpected places, and that Lily's refusal to accept Thunder's fate would lead to a surprising turn of events that none of them could have predicted. The Miller family kitchen was unusually quiet that evening. The only sounds were the soft ticking of the old clock on the wall and the occasional scrape of forks against plates. No one was really eating, just pushing food around. Even Lily, who normally chattered through dinner about her day at school, sat silent, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. Ben cleared his throat. I spoke with Dr. Wilson again today. he said, his voice gentle. She thinks it would be best to schedule the appointment for Monday. Annie reached across the table and squeezed his hand, her own eyes filling with tears. Neither of them looked at Lily, afraid of seeing the fresh pain that would appear on their daughter's face. What appointment? Lily asked, though from her tone she already knew. She might be only 6, but she had picked up on the hushed conversations, the sad glances, the way the adults spoke around certain words when she was nearby. Honey, Annie said, remember how we talked about Thunder being very sick? And how sometimes when animals are too sick and in too much pain, the kindest thing is to help them, not be in pain anymore? Lily's lower lip trembled, but she lifted her chin stubbornly. He's not ready to go yet. Sweetheart, Ben tried again, Dr. Wilson says he's suffering. He can't stand up, he can't run in the pasture like he loves to do. His body is failing him, and it's not fair to keep him. No! Lily's small fist came down on the table, making her glass of milk wobble dangerously. You're giving up on him! He wouldn't give up on us. Before either parent could respond, she had pushed back her chair and run from the room. The sound of her bedroom door slamming echoed through the small farmhouse. Annie made to stand up, but Ben shook his head. Give her a little time, he said softly. This is a lot for her to process. Annie sank back into her chair, a tear sliding down her cheek. I don't know if any amount of time is enough. That horse is her best friend. I know, Ben said, reaching over to wipe away her tear with his thumb. I keep wishing there was something more we could do. I called that fancy equine hospital in Lexington today. Annie looked up. What did they say? Same as Dr. Wilson. Without being able to examine him, they can't be certain, but from what I described, they think it's a degenerative neurological condition. Even if we somehow found the money, the treatments would only buy him a little time, not fix the problem. They sat in silence for a while longer, the food growing cold on their plates. I'll go check on her, Annie said finally, standing up and gathering the barely touched dishes. She found Lily not in her bedroom as expected, but sitting on the floor of the bathroom, surrounded by bandages, antiseptic cream, and various other medical supplies she'd pulled from the cabinet under the sink. Lily, what are you doing? Annie asked, kneeling down beside her daughter. I'm going to be a vet, Lily said firmly, arranging the supplies in neat rows. I'm going to learn how to make Thunder better. Annie's heart broke a little more. She sat down on the bathroom floor, heedless of the scattered bandages. Being a vet is a wonderful goal, she said carefully. But it takes many years of school and training. And even the best vets in the world can't fix everything. Then I'll find someone who can, Lily insisted, her small hands clutching a roll of gauze so tightly her knuckles were white. There has to be someone. Annie pulled her daughter into her arms, and after a moment of resistance, Lily collapsed against her, the tears she'd been holding back finally spilling over. They sat there on the bathroom floor for a long time, Annie rocking her daughter gently as she cried. I don't want him to go. Lily sobbed into her mother's shoulder. He's my best friend in the whole world. I know, baby, Annie whispered, her own tears falling into her daughter's hair. I know. Later that night, after they'd finally gotten Lily to bed, Ben and Annie sat on their porch swing looking out at the dark outline of the stable where Thunder lay. The spring night was cool, and Annie had wrapped a quilt around their shoulders. Maybe we should wait a little longer, Annie said. Give her more time to say goodbye. Ben sighed, his breath visible in the cool night air. Dr. Wilson says he's getting worse each day. His muscles are starting to waste away from disuse. The pressure sores are getting harder to manage. Waiting too long would be cruel. I know you're right, Annie admitted. I just wish. Me too, Ben said, pulling her closer. The weekend passed in a strange, sad haze. They tried to make it special for Lily and Thunder. Ben built a small ramp up to the stall door so Lily could go in and out more easily. Annie took Friday off from the clinic and helped Lily bake special horse treats with molasses and apples. Friends and neighbors who had heard about Thunder's condition stopped by to say goodbye. Old Mr. Peterson from the farm down the road, who had helped train Thunder when he was young, sat quietly with the horse for nearly an hour, just talking to him in a low voice that no one else could hear. Lily's teacher, Ms. Harlow, brought a beautiful hand-drawn card signed by everyone in Lily's class. Through it all, Lily maintained a strange, determined optimism. She told everyone who came that Thunder was just resting, that he would be better soon. The adults exchanged sad glances over her head but didn't contradict her. On Sunday evening, as dusk fell, Ben found Lily in Thunder's stall, curled up against the horse's neck, reading him a story. Thunder's head was resting on the straw, but his ears were perked forward, listening to her voice. "Hey there," Ben said softly, sitting down on a bale of hay just inside the stall door. "What story are you reading him?" "The Velveteen Rabbit," Lily said, holding up the book so he could see. "It's about a toy that becomes real because it's loved so much." "That's a good one," Ben said, his throat tight. Lily turned back to Thunder, stroking his neck. "I told Thunder that he's like the rabbit. He's real because I love him so much. And real things don't just disappear." Ben didn't know what to say to that, so he just sat with them as Lily finished the story. When she was done, she closed the book and laid her head against Thunder's neck. "Dad," she said after a while, her voice small. "Yes, sweetie? Is it going to hurt?" "When Dr. Wilson helps Thunder, go away?" Ben moved closer, sitting down on the straw beside them. "No, honey. It won't hurt at all. It's very peaceful, like falling asleep." Lily nodded, considering this.
"Can I stay with him when it happens?"
Ben had discussed this with Dr. Wilson and Annie. They had agreed that Lily was too young to witness the procedure, that it might traumatize her further. But looking at his daughter now, at the solemn determination in her young face, he wasn't so sure. "We'll talk about it with Mom," he said gently. "But it might be better to say goodbye before Dr. Wilson comes." Lily seemed to accept this, though he could tell she wasn't happy about it. She went back to stroking Thunder's neck, humming softly to him. Later that night, Ben and Annie had another long discussion about whether Lily should be present the next day. In the end, they decided she could stay until just before the injection, to say a final goodbye, but would then go to their neighbor's house while Dr. Wilson completed the procedure. Monday morning dawned bright and clear, one of those perfect spring days that seemed to mock their sadness. Ben rose early and went to check on Thunder, bringing him a special breakfast of sweet feed with extra molasses, a treat the horse had always loved. Thunder nickered at the sight of him, lifting his head with interest at the smell of the feed. "Hey, old friend," Ben said, setting down the bucket within easy reach. "Brought you something special." As Thunder ate, Ben sat beside him, occasionally stroking his neck and talking softly about nothing in particular. He was going to miss this horse terribly, not just for what he meant to Lily, but for himself, too. Thunder had been a constant in their lives for so long. Annie and Lily joined him a little later. Lily had dressed carefully in her favorite overalls and had brought a bouquet of dandelions and wild clover she'd picked from the yard. She arranged them carefully on the straw near Thunder's head. "So you have flowers," she explained to the horse. "Everyone should have flowers on special days." The morning stretched on. Dr. Wilson wasn't due until 2 o'clock. They had wanted morning appointments, but she had emergency calls to make first. The waiting was its own kind of torture. They took turns sitting with Thunder. Friends stopped by again. The neighbor, Mrs. Chen, brought a casserole for later and promised to take good care of Lily when the time came. Her own daughter, Grace, who was 9 and one of Lily's good friends, had made a friendship bracelet in Thunder's colors, chestnut brown and white, which Lily immediately tied around her wrist. As noon approached, the visitors left, understanding the family needed time alone. Annie went inside to make sandwiches that no one really wanted but would try to eat anyway. Ben sat on the hay bale, watching as Lily continued her quiet, one-sided conversation with Thunder. "And when you're all better," she was saying, "we can go back to our riding lessons. I've been practicing my posture just like you taught me." Ben felt a fresh wave of sorrow wash over him. Despite everything they'd told her, she was still holding on to hope. He wondered if they'd done the right thing, if they should have been more firm, made her understand there would be no miracle recovery. What he didn't know was that in just a few hours, that stubborn hope of hers would lead to a discovery that would change everything. That sometimes, the refusal to accept what seems inevitable can open up possibilities no one else can see. And that the bond between a little girl and her horse was about to reveal something that all the adults, with all their knowledge and experience, had somehow missed. The clock on the kitchen wall seemed to tick louder than usual as the Miller family ate their lunch in silence. It was nearly 1 o'clock. Dr. Wilson would arrive in an hour. The sandwiches Annie had made sat mostly untouched on their plates. "I'm going back to Thunder," Lily announced, pushing away her barely eaten sandwich. "Honey, you should try to eat a little more," Annie said gently. Lily shook her head. I'm not hungry, and I don't want to waste time. Thunder needs me. Ben and Annie exchanged a look over their daughter's head. There was no point in arguing. Food wasn't important right now. All right, Ben said. We'll all go back out in a minute. Mrs. Chen would be arriving soon to take Lily to her house when Dr. Wilson came. They had explained to Lily that she would say her goodbyes, then go play with Grace while the adults helped Thunder. Lily had protested at first, but eventually agreed when Ben promised that he would stay with Thunder the whole time, so the horse wouldn't be scared. As Annie cleared the plates, the phone rang. Ben answered it, his voice low. When he hung up, he turned to Annie. That was Dr. Wilson. She's running late. There was an emergency with a cow giving birth at the Donovan farm. She won't be here until 3 now. Annie nodded. Another hour of waiting. Another hour of watching their daughter's heartbreak. Another hour of seeing Thunder's discomfort. I'll call Mrs. Chen and let her know the new time, she said. Lily had already left the kitchen, the screen door swinging shut behind her as she rushed back to the stable. Ben followed her while Annie made the call. In the stable, Lily was sitting cross-legged on the clean straw next to Thunder's head. The horse's eyes were half closed, but Lily was speaking to him softly, her small hand stroking his forelock. Ben sat down on the hay bale that had become his regular spot over the past few days. Watching his daughter with her beloved horse, he felt a tightness in his chest that made it hard to breathe. She was so young to be facing this kind of loss. Dad? Lily said suddenly, turning to look at him. Can I check something on Thunder? What do you mean, sweetheart? I want to check all of him. Like Dr. Wilson does. Maybe we missed something. Ben's heart ached. His daughter was still looking for a miracle. Honey, Dr. Wilson has checked him very thoroughly. She's a trained veterinarian. But she doesn't know Thunder like I do, Lily insisted. Please, Dad, before... She couldn't finish the sentence, but her eyes pleaded with him. How could he refuse? If it gave her some sense of closure to play vet one last time, to feel like she'd tried everything, then he should let her. Okay, he agreed. What do you want to check? Lily's face lit up with determination. She stood up and walked around to Thunder's back, looking critically at his hind legs, the ones that no longer worked. In school, Ms. Harlow taught us about doctors, she explained as she carefully examined Thunder's legs. They use... What's that word? The thing they tap on your knee with? A reflex hammer? Ben supplied. Yeah, that. And they do tests to see if your body works right. Lily was gently running her hands down Thunder's back legs now, feeling carefully along the muscles that had begun to waste away. Ben watched her, impressed by how methodical she was being. She'd clearly been paying attention to Dr. Wilson's examinations. Can you hand me my backpack? Lily asked, pointing to her small pink backpack that sat near the stall door. Ben passed it to her, and she pulled out a small flashlight, a birthday gift from her uncle last year. She clicked it on and began examining Thunder more closely, shining the light along his spine and down his legs. I'm looking for clues, she explained seriously, like Detective Nancy. Detective Nancy was the main character in a series of children's books Lily loved, about a young girl who solved mysteries in her small town. That's very thorough of you, Ben said, playing along. He glanced at his watch. It was nearly 2 o'clock now. One more hour of this sad vigil. Lily continued her examination, muttering to herself as she checked different parts of Thunder's body. Ben was about to suggest they take a break when Lily suddenly gasped. Dad, look at this. There was something in her voice, an urgency, an excitement, that made Ben immediately get up and go to her side. What is it, Lily? She was pointing to a spot on Thunder's lower back, just above where his tail began. Look what happens when I touch right here. She pressed gently on a specific spot, and Ben saw it immediately. Thunder's whole body tensed, his ears flattening slightly, his eye rolling back to look at them. And look at his face, Lily whispered. It's his hurt face. Ben frowned, leaning closer. The spot Lily was pointing to didn't look unusual. No visible wound or swelling, but Thunder's reaction was unmistakable. Try touching somewhere else, he suggested. Lily moved her hand a few inches to the left and pressed. Again, nothing. She moved it to the right. Again, no reaction from Thunder. Now here again, she said, returning to the original spot. The same reaction from Thunder. That tension, that flicker of discomfort in his eyes. See? Lily said triumphantly. He's not sick, Dad, he's hurt. Right here. Ben felt a strange sensation in his stomach like butterflies. Could it be possible? Had they all missed something so simple? Lily, how did you notice this? She looked at him as if the answer was obvious. I watch him all the time. I know all his faces. And yesterday when I was reading to him, I was leaning against his back and my elbow pressed right here. She touched the spot again, and he made this little noise like he was trying not to say ouch. So today I wanted to check it again. Ben stared at his daughter in amazement. While the adults had accepted the diagnosis of a degenerative condition, Lily had been observing, noticing, paying attention in the way only someone who truly loved thunder could. Stay right here, he said, standing up quickly. I'm going to get your mom. He found Annie in the kitchen making a fresh pitcher of lemonade for when Mrs. Chen and Grace arrived. Annie, he said breathlessly, you need to come see this. Lily might have found something. Annie set down the pitcher. Her eyebrows raised in question but followed him without hesitation. In the stable, Lily was still beside Thunder, gently petting him and whispering that everything would be okay. That she had found the problem and now they could fix it. Show your mom what you showed me, Ben urged. Lily carefully demonstrated, pressing on different spots on Thunder's back until she reached the sensitive area. Again, Thunder tensed, his eyes showing discomfort. It's like when I got a splinter, Lily explained earnestly to her mother. Remember? My finger didn't work right until you took it out. Maybe Thunder has a giant splinter. Annie knelt down, her nurse's training kicking in as she carefully felt the area. There's definitely something going on here, she said, looking up at Ben with a mixture of confusion and hope. I don't feel anything unusual on the surface, but his reaction is clear as day. Should we call Dr. Wilson? Tell her what Lily found? Ben asked. Annie nodded. Absolutely. This is a specific pain response, not generalized weakness. Even if it's not the whole answer, she should know about it before. She trailed off, glancing at Lily. Ben went to make the call, his heart racing. He wasn't getting his hopes up. It could still be part of the neurological condition, a particular nerve being affected, but it was the first concrete clue they'd had that might point to something other than a generalized degenerative disease. Dr. Wilson answered on the third ring. Dr. Wilson, it's Ben Miller, he said quickly. Listen, before you come for the appointment, Lily has noticed something about Thunder that I think you should know about. He explained what his daughter had found, the specific spot on Thunder's back that caused such a clear pain response. There was a pause on the other end of the line. That's interesting, Dr. Wilson said finally. I checked his spine, of course, but I may not have applied pressure in exactly that spot. It could be significant, or it could just be a pressure point that's become sensitive due to his prolonged recumbency. But isn't it worth checking more thoroughly before we proceed? Ben asked, unable to bring himself to say the word euthanize even now. Another pause. Yes, of course. I'll bring some portable imaging equipment with me. We can take a closer look at that area. But Ben, her voice softened, I don't want you getting your hopes up too much. The overall clinical picture still suggests a serious neurological issue. I understand, Ben said. But we have to check, right? For Lily's sake, if nothing else. Absolutely. I'll see you at 3. When he hung up, Ben returned to the stable. Lily was showing Annie how she'd been carefully keeping track of exactly where the sensitive spot was, marking it gently with a piece of chalk so they wouldn't lose it. Dr. Wilson is still coming at 3, Ben told them. But she's going to bring some equipment to check the spot Lily found more carefully. So we're not saying goodbye today? Lily asked, hope lighting up her face. We're going to check this first, Ben said carefully. Dr. Wilson still thinks Thunder is very sick, but she agrees we should look more closely at what you found. He's not sick, Lily said with absolute conviction. He's hurt, and hurt things can get better. The hour until Dr. Wilson's arrival passed more quickly than the earlier hours of waiting. There was a new energy in the stable, a tentative hope that no one wanted to name out loud for fear of crushing disappointment. Annie called Mrs. Chen to explain the change in plans. They would still need her to take Lily, but not until after Dr. Wilson had examined Thunder. At exactly 3 o'clock, they heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. Dr. Wilson's old blue truck pulled up, and she emerged carrying her usual medical bag plus a larger case that must contain the imaging equipment she'd mentioned. Hello, Miller's, she said as she entered the stable, her face kind but reserved. She knelt down beside Lily. I hear you've made an important observation about thunder. Lily nodded solemnly. He has a hurt spot. Right here. She pointed to the chalk mark she'd made. Dr. Wilson nodded. That was very observant of you. Let's take a closer look, shall we? As the veterinarian set up her equipment, Ben and Annie exchanged glances. They were trying not to hope too much, but it was hard not to feel a flicker of possibility. What if after all this there was something they had missed? Something that could be fixed? What neither of them realized yet was that their daughter's stubborn refusal to accept Thunder's fate, her insistence on checking every possibility, and her deep knowledge of her beloved horse were about to change everything. That sometimes the most powerful diagnostic tool isn't sophisticated medical equipment or years of professional training, but the simple, unwavering love of a child who refuses to give up. The stable was quiet except for the soft beeping of Dr. Wilson's portable imaging device as she ran it slowly over Thunder's lower back. Lily watched intently, her eyes wide, barely blinking as if afraid to miss something important. Ben and Annie stood nearby, trying not to hover but unable to keep their distance. This is a portable ultrasound, Dr. Wilson explained to Lily as she worked. It lets me see inside Thunder's body without hurting him. Like Superman's X-ray vision? Lily asked. Dr. Wilson smiled. Something like that, though not quite as powerful. It shows me soft tissues, muscles, tendons, things like that. On the small screen, black and white images shifted and changed as Dr. Wilson moved the probe carefully around the area Lily had identified. To the Millers, it looked like static on a television, but Dr. Wilson's eyes narrowed in concentration, clearly seeing patterns they couldn't. She said, adjusting the position slightly. There's definitely inflammation in this area. What does that mean? Ben asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. It means there's swelling. The body's response to injury or irritation. Dr. Wilson moved the probe again, pressing a button to freeze an image on the screen. I'm not seeing anything obvious causing it, though. No obvious fracture or dislocation of the vertebrae. Lily's face fell slightly, but she stayed focused on the procedure. I'm going to try something else, Dr. Wilson said, putting away the ultrasound and pulling out a different device from her case. This is a portable X-ray. It will show us the bones more clearly. Setting up the X-ray took a few minutes. Dr. Wilson positioned it carefully over Thunder's lower back, making sure everyone stood back for safety when she took the images. Now we wait for them to develop, she said, checking her watch. It'll take about 10 minutes for these portable ones. Those 10 minutes felt like hours. Ben paced back and forth at the entrance to the stall. Annie sat on a hay bale, her hands twisting in her lap. Lily stayed right beside Thunder, whispering to him that they were going to figure this out, that Dr. Wilson was going to find what was wrong and fix it. Finally, Dr. Wilson held up the X-ray films, examining them carefully against the light coming through the stable window. I see something, she said slowly, her voice changing. There's a small shadow here that shouldn't be there. Ben and Annie moved closer, peering at the film, though they didn't know what they were looking for. What is it? Annie asked. Dr. Wilson pointed to a tiny white speck on the film, barely the size of a grain of rice. It appears to be a foreign object embedded very close to his spine. A foreign object? Ben repeated. Like what? I can't tell from the X-ray alone. Could be a piece of metal, a splinter of bone, a stone, anything dense enough to show up on the image. Dr. Wilson looked thoughtful. It's positioned right where the spinal nerves branch out to his hind legs. That could explain the paralysis. Lily's eyes widened. Like a giant splinter, she exclaimed. I told you. Dr. Wilson smiled at her. You were right to notice that spot, Lily, very observant. Can you remove it? Ben asked, trying to keep the desperate hope out of his voice. Dr. Wilson frowned, studying the X-ray again. It's in a very delicate location right near the spine. I wouldn't want to attempt it here in the field. She looked up at Ben and Annie. But if this is indeed what's causing his symptoms, then yes, it could potentially be removed surgically. You mean, there's a chance he could recover? Annie asked, her voice barely a whisper. I don't want to give false hope, Dr. Wilson said carefully. Even if this object is removed successfully, there could be permanent damage to the nerves. And we still don't know exactly what it is or how long it's been there. She paused, thinking. But yes, if this is the cause rather than a degenerative condition, There's a chance he could regain some or all function in his hind legs. Lily was practically vibrating with excitement. I knew it. I knew Thunder wasn't ready to go yet. She threw her arms around the horse's neck and Thunder nickered softly, as if understanding something important had happened. What's the next step? Ben asked, trying to stay practical despite the surge of hope he felt. We need to get him to the equine hospital in Lexington, Dr. Wilson said. They have the specialized equipment and surgeons needed for this kind of procedure. But how? Annie asked, looking at Thunder still lying on his side. He can't walk and he's too heavy to move easily. Dr. Wilson nodded. We'd need an equine ambulance, essentially a special trailer with a winch system that can lift him safely. I can make some calls, see if there's one available. How much would all this cost? Ben asked quietly, the practical concern unavoidable. Dr. Wilson's face grew serious. I won't lie to you, Ben. The ambulance, the surgery, the hospital stay, it would be expensive. Several $1,000s at minimum. Ben and Annie exchanged looks. They didn't have that kind of money just sitting around. But how could they not try now that there was hope? We'll figure something out, Annie said firmly. We have some savings. Maybe we could set up a payment plan with the hospital. Or sell some things, Ben added. My tools, maybe. I could pick up extra carpentry jobs. Let me make some calls first, Dr. Wilson said, pulling out her cell phone. Let's see what our options are before we worry too much about the cost. She stepped outside to make her calls, leaving the family alone with Thunder and this new fragile hope. Is Thunder going to be okay now? Lily asked, looking up at her parents with such trust that it almost broke Ben's heart. We don't know for sure yet, sweetheart, he said honestly. Dr. Wilson is going to try to help him, but it might be complicated. But we're not saying goodbye today? Lily pressed. Annie knelt down beside her daughter. No, we're not saying goodbye today. Thanks to you, we're going to try something else first. Lily's smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. I knew it, she repeated. I just knew it. Outside, they could hear Dr. Wilson's voice as she made call after call. 20 minutes passed before she returned, a determined look on her face. Good news and not so good news, she said. The good news is that Lexington Equine Hospital has a surgeon who specializes in spinal cases. He's looked at the x-rays I sent over and agrees that surgery is worth attempting. And the not so good news? Ben asked. The equine ambulance from their facility is out on another call and won't be available until tomorrow morning. And... She hesitated. The estimated cost for everything would be around $8,000. Ben felt his stomach drop. It was even more than he'd feared. That's a lot of money, Annie said quietly. I've worked with these folks before, Dr. Wilson said. They do offer payment plans for hardship cases and... She hesitated again, then seemed to make up her mind about something. I'd be willing to discount my own fees for overseeing his care. Thunder's a special horse and Lily is clearly a special girl. That's very kind, Ben said, genuinely touched. But even with a payment plan and your discount, I'm not sure how we'd manage it. Lily had been listening quietly to the adult conversation, her young face serious. Now she spoke up. What about my college fund? Could we use that? Ben and Annie looked at their daughter in surprise. They had been putting a small amount away each month since Lily was born, hoping to give her a head start on her education. Honey, that's for your future, Annie explained gently. But Thunder is my future too, Lily said with the simple logic of a child. What good is college if I don't have Thunder to tell about it when I come home? Ben felt a lump form in his throat. The pure love in his daughter's voice was almost overwhelming. We'll figure something out, he promised her. We won't give up on Thunder. Dr. Wilson cleared her throat. There's something else you should know. I took the liberty of calling a few people while I was outside. Word has already spread about Thunder's situation. Small towns, you know, and well, people want to help. Help? Annie repeated. Dr. Wilson nodded. Mr. Peterson said he'd contribute $500. The Harpers from the feed store said they'd put in $300. Ms. Harlow is talking about organizing a fundraiser with the school. What? Ben was stunned. They weren't wealthy people and times were tight for everyone. This community takes care of its own, Dr. Wilson said simply, and a lot of folks around here think the world of you all. Not to mention, Lily's determination has touched a lot of hearts. Lily beamed with pride, petting Thunder's neck. See? Everyone wants to help Thunder. As if on cue, they heard more cars pulling up outside. Mrs. Chen appeared at the stable door with her daughter Grace beside her. Behind them were other neighbors. The Harpers from the feed store, the Johnson family from down the road, even Miss Harlow, Lily's teacher. We heard the news, Mrs. Chen said, stepping inside. Is it true? There's hope for Thunder? Ben nodded, still too overwhelmed to speak. We want to help, Mr. Harper said, his usually gruff voice gentle. Whatever you need. We can't ask you all to, Annie began, but Ms. Harlow cut her off with a wave of her hand. You're not asking. We're offering. That's what neighbors do. For the next hour, the stable was filled with people coming and going, each bringing what they could, offers of money, promises of help with farm chores while they dealt with Thunder's treatment, casseroles for the freezer so they wouldn't have to worry about cooking. Someone set up a donations jar on a hay bale, and it was quickly filling with bills. Mrs. Chen had brought her laptop and was setting up an online fundraising page. We'll share it with everyone we know, she explained. I bet we can raise the whole amount by tomorrow. Through it all, Lily stayed by Thunder's side, occasionally giving updates to the visitors, but mostly just keeping him company, making sure he wasn't scared by all the activity. As evening approached, the crowd finally thinned. Dr. Wilson had worked out arrangements with the equine hospital. The ambulance would come first thing tomorrow. Thunder had been given pain medication and anti-inflammatories to keep him comfortable through the night. I'll be back at dawn, Dr. Wilson promised as she packed up her equipment. Try to get some rest tonight, all of you. Tomorrow will be a big day. After she left, the Millers sat together in Thunder's stall, still processing everything that had happened. The donations jar, now sitting on their kitchen table, contained over $2,000 already. The online fundraiser had nearly 1,000 more, with new donations coming in steadily. I still can't believe it, Ben said, shaking his head in wonder. This morning we thought we were saying goodbye, and now we have hope, Annie finished for him, squeezing his hand. Lily yawned, the excitement of the day finally catching up with her. Can I sleep out here with Thunder tonight? She asked. I want to make sure he knows we're not leaving him. Ben and Annie exchanged looks. Normally they would say no, but nothing about this day had been normal. I'll bring out your sleeping bag and some pillows, Annie said. As she went to the house, Ben watched his daughter with Thunder. The horse's eyes were calm now, the pain medication having taken effect. Lily was telling him all about the plan for tomorrow, promising him that soon he would feel better. You really did it, kiddo, Ben said softly. You saved Thunder. Lily looked up at her dad. Not yet, she said seriously, but we will. And in that moment, with his daughter's unwavering faith before him and the overwhelming generosity of their community around them, Ben allowed himself to truly believe that maybe, just maybe, this story would have a happy ending after all. Dawn broke over the Miller farm, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Ben was already awake, having slept poorly with all the worries and hopes swirling through his mind. He found Annie in the kitchen making coffee and packing a small bag with snacks and Lily's favorite stuffed animal. How much did we raise overnight? He asked, nodding toward the laptop that still sat open on the kitchen table. Annie's face broke into a smile. Just over $7,000. And Dr. Wilson called an hour ago. She's managed to negotiate the hospital fees down. We're going to be okay, Ben. We can do this. Ben felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The generosity of their community still amazed him. People they barely knew had donated, sharing the fundraiser page and leaving messages of encouragement. I should go check on Lily and Thunder, he said, pouring a quick cup of coffee. In the stable, he found his daughter exactly where they'd left her the night before, curled up in her sleeping bag next to Thunder. The horse was awake, his eyes brighter than they had been in days, as if he somehow knew that things were changing. Morning, Dad, Lily said, yawning and sitting up. Is the horse ambulance coming soon? Dr. Wilson will be here with it in about an hour, Ben told her. Let's get you some breakfast before then. Lily shook her head. I want to stay with Thunder. How about I bring you some toast out here? Ben suggested, knowing better than to argue. Lily nodded, already turning her attention back to Thunder, stroking his neck and telling him about the adventure they would have today. The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Annie brought breakfast out to the stable. Neighbors began to arrive, offering more help. Someone to watch the farm while they were gone, others with additional donations. Mrs. Chen arrived with her daughter Grace, bringing homemade muffins and a hand-drawn card from Grace that read, "Get well soon, Thunder," in wobbly letters surrounded by colorful hearts. At precisely 7 o'clock, they heard the rumble of a large vehicle coming up the driveway. Dr. Wilson had arrived with the equine ambulance, a specially designed trailer pulled by a heavy-duty truck. The driver, a sturdy man with kind eyes, introduced himself as Joe from the Lexington Equine Hospital. "We're going to take good care of your boy," he assured Lily, who watched with wide eyes as he and Dr. Wilson began setting up the equipment needed to safely move Thunder. "How will you get him in there?" Lily asked, pointing to the trailer. "Watch and see," Joe said with a wink. "We've got a special system just for horses who can't walk." From the trailer, they unloaded what looked like a large sling with various straps and attachments. Working carefully, Joe, Dr. Wilson, and Ben positioned the sling under and around Thunder's body. "This will support him completely," Dr. Wilson explained to Lily, "so he won't have to use his legs at all." Once the sling was secure, Joe connected it to a winch system built into the trailer. Slowly, carefully, Thunder was lifted just enough to clear the ground. The horse's eyes widened in surprise, but he remained calm, as if understanding that these strange proceedings were somehow for his benefit. "Good boy," Lily encouraged from where Dr. Wilson had instructed her to stand, safely out of the way but where Thunder could still see her. "You're doing great." Inch by inch, they maneuvered Thunder out of the stall, through the stable door, and finally into the waiting trailer. It was a painstaking process, taking nearly 45 minutes to move him just a short distance, but finally he was settled securely inside. "Now what?" Lily asked, peering into the trailer where Thunder hung suspended in the sling. "Now we drive very carefully to Lexington," Dr. Wilson said. "Your mom and dad will follow in your car, and you'll be riding with me in my truck if that's okay. I thought you might have questions about what will happen at the hospital." Lily nodded solemnly, clearly pleased at being treated so grown up. The journey to Lexington took over an hour. Joe drove the ambulance slowly, avoiding bumps and taking turns with extreme care. Ben and Annie followed close behind, with Dr. Wilson and Lily bringing up the rear of their small convoy. In Dr. Wilson's truck, Lily bombarded the veterinarian with questions. What exactly would the surgeons do? How long would it take? When would Thunder be able to come home? Dr. Wilson answered each one patiently, never talking down to the child or sugarcoating the reality. "The surgery is delicate," she explained. "They'll need to very carefully remove whatever is pressing on his spinal nerves without causing more damage. And recovery will take time, weeks, maybe months. But he will recover, right?" Lily asked, her voice small. Dr. Wilson glanced at her briefly before returning her eyes to the road. "I believe he has a good chance now. And that's thanks to you, Lily. If you hadn't noticed that spot, if you hadn't insisted we check," she didn't need to finish the sentence. They both knew what would have happened. At the hospital, a team was waiting for them. The trailer backed up to a special loading dock, and Thunder was carefully winched out and moved inside. Everything was happening with quick efficiency now. Medical personnel examining the x-rays Dr. Wilson had sent ahead, preparing an operating room. The head surgeon, Dr. Reynolds, came to speak with the family in a small waiting room. He was a tall man with silver hair and glasses, his blue surgical scrubs already on. "Based on the advanced imaging we just completed," he explained, pointing to some new scans on his tablet, "we can now see the object clearly. It appears to be a small metal fragment, possibly a piece of fencing staple or nail, that has somehow worked its way through the tissue to this position near the spine. It's been causing inflammation and pressure on the nerves that control his hind legs." "Can you remove it?" Ben asked the question they were all thinking. Dr. Reynolds nodded. "I believe so, yes. It's in a challenging location, but accessible. The real question will be whether there's been permanent nerve damage during the time it's been there. And if there has been," Annie asked, "then recovery may be partial rather than complete. He might always have some weakness or difficulty with his hind legs, but removing the source of the problem is the critical first step regardless." "When will you do the surgery?" Ben asked. "We're prepping him now. The procedure itself should take about 2 hours, and then we'll know more about the prognosis." The waiting was the hardest part. They sat in the small room, picking at the sandwiches from the hospital cafeteria that Annie had thought to buy. Lily colored in a horse coloring book that one of the nurses had found for her, though her usual enthusiasm was subdued by worry. 3 hours passed before Dr. Reynolds returned, still in his surgical scrubs but with his mask pulled down. The family stood up immediately, searching his face for news. The surgery was successful, he said, and Lily let out a little cheer. We removed this, he added, holding up a small container. Inside was a tiny sliver of metal. No bigger than a grain of rice, that's it? Ben asked in disbelief. That tiny thing caused all this trouble? Size doesn't always correspond to impact, Dr. Reynolds explained. Especially when it comes to the nervous system. This little fragment was positioned exactly where it could cause maximum problems. Where did it come from? Annie wondered. Dr. Reynolds shrugged. Hard to say for certain. My guess would be a piece of a staple used in fencing. Horses can get these embedded in their hooves or legs, and sometimes they migrate through the tissue over time. It could have been there for months or even years, gradually working its way closer to the spine. And now that it's gone, Ben asked, what happens now? Now we wait, the doctor said. Thunder is in recovery. The next 24 to 48 hours are critical. We'll be watching for signs of improved nerve function. He'll stay here for at least a week, possibly longer, depending on his progress. Can I see him? Lily asked, speaking up for the first time since the doctor had entered. Dr. Reynolds looked down at her, his face softening. Not just yet. He's still under anesthesia. But later today, once he's stable and awake, you can visit him briefly. The day stretched on. They took turns getting fresh air outside the hospital, bringing back snacks and drinks. Ben called the neighbors to update them on Thunder's progress, and the news spread quickly through the community and on the online fundraiser page, where donations continued to come in. Finally, in the late afternoon, a nurse came to tell them they could visit Thunder for a few minutes. She led them through the hospital to a special recovery stall, where their horse lay on a thick bed of cushioned matting, still partially supported by a sling. His eyes were open, though drowsy from medication. Thunder. Lily rushed to his head, dropping to her knees to look into his eyes. We got the bad thing out. The doctors fixed you. Thunder's ears pricked forward at the sound of her voice, and he made a soft nickering sound. He's still very groggy from the anesthesia, the nurse explained, and he's on strong pain medication. But he's doing well so far. When will we know if his legs will work again? Annie asked quietly. We'll begin testing for nerve responses tomorrow, the nurse said. It's too soon to tell right now. They stayed for the few minutes they were allowed, Lily chattering softly to Thunder about everything that had happened, promising him that he would feel better soon, that they would take him home and he would run in the pasture again. As evening approached, Dr. Reynolds suggested they get a hotel room nearby. There's nothing more you can do tonight, and the next few days will be long ones. You should rest while you can. Reluctantly, they agreed, promising Lily they would return first thing in the morning. Days passed, turning into weeks. Thunder remained at the hospital, making slow but steady progress. First came the news that he had regained some feeling in his hind legs, a moment of celebration for the Millers. Then gradually he began to show more movement, small twitches and attempts to shift his position. Physical therapy began, special exercises, hydrotherapy in a small pool where Thunder could move his legs without bearing weight, massage to prevent further muscle atrophy. The bills continued to mount, but so did the community support. A benefit concert organized by Lily's school raised another $1,000. Mr. Peterson donated hay for the entire coming winter, so the Millers wouldn't have that expense. 3 weeks after the surgery, Thunder was deemed strong enough to attempt standing on his own. The Millers were all there for the big moment, watching anxiously as the support sling was gradually loosened. Thunder's legs trembled with the effort, but he stayed up. Wobbly, uncertain, but standing, Lily couldn't contain her joy, clapping and jumping up and down. He did it, he did it. It's a very promising sign, Dr. Reynolds said, smiling at her enthusiasm. He still has a long road of rehabilitation ahead, but this suggests the nerve damage wasn't permanent. By the 6-week mark, Thunder was ready to go home, though with strict instructions for continued care and therapy. The day they brought him back to the farm, it seemed like half the town turned out to welcome him. A hand-painted banner hung across the stable door. Welcome home, Thunder. He walked down the ramp of the trailer slowly, his gait still unsteady but improving every day. Lily led him carefully, talking to him the whole time, telling him how brave he was, how strong. As summer turned to fall, Thunder's recovery continued. There were setbacks, days when he seemed stiffer, when the weather changes made the healing tissues ache. But the overall trajectory was positive. By October, he was able to trot short distances. By November he was galloping again, though only for brief periods. One crisp day in early December, with the first light snow dusting the pasture, Ben stood at the fence watching as Lily rode Thunder at a gentle walk around the paddock. It was their first ride since before his collapse, carefully supervised and kept brief. Annie joined him, slipping her arm through his. "I still can't believe it sometimes," she said, her breath visible in the cold air. "That we came so close to losing him." Ben nodded, watching his daughter's face, the absolute joy and pride shining there as she guided her horse through a simple turn. "All because she wouldn't give up," he said, "because she knew him well enough to notice something we all missed." Lily and Thunder completed their small circuit and came to a stop near Ben and Annie. "Did you see?" Lily called excitedly. "He didn't wobble at all on that last turn." "We saw," Ben confirmed. "You're doing great, both of you." Thunder snorted, tossing his head as if in agreement, and they all laughed. The story of Thunder's recovery had spread beyond their small community. A reporter from the regional newspaper had written a feature about it, focusing on Lily's persistence and the community's response. A veterinary journal had published a case study. Dr. Wilson used the story in presentations to veterinary students about the importance of listening to owners' observations, but none of that mattered as much as this simple moment, a girl and her horse, together in the winter sunlight, a future stretching before them that had almost been lost. As Ben watched them, he thought about how close they had come to a different ending, how easily they might have missed the tiny fragment that had caused so much trouble, how fortunate they were that Lily had noticed, had insisted, had refused to accept that nothing could be done. Sometimes, he realized, the most important insights come from the most unexpected sources. And sometimes the pure love and stubborn hope of a child can change everything. Thunder tossed his head again, seemingly eager to continue the ride, and Lily looked to her parents for permission. "Just once more around," Annie agreed, smiling. As horse and rider moved off again, Ben squeezed his wife's hand. "He's really going to be okay, isn't he?" "Thanks to Lily," Annie said. "And to everyone who helped, but mostly to Lily." Ben nodded. Some people might call it a miracle, but he knew better. It wasn't a miracle that had saved Thunder. It was love, determination, and a child's refusal to give up on someone she cared about. And in the end, that had made all the difference.